It's the annual Cyhawk game, Iowa and Iowa State. These two teams have played just one time inside Kinnick Stadium since Iowa's win back in 2018, and it was a loss in 2022 for the Hawkeyes, a very narrow 10-7 defeat. That was a very low point in that 2022 season. Wasn't a great year, obviously. Iowa finished that year, 8-5, I believe. And the offense was horrid. We saw signs of growth in week one under new offensive coordinator Tim Lester and what we hope to be a much healthier Cade McNamara. He looked pretty good week one. If you missed any of our post-game coverage after the game against Illinois State, you can check it out on the channel. But today we're talking Iowa State and the challenge the Cyclones bring to Kinnick Stadium. And I'll give you my two key matchups to follow. I think it's an intriguing, almost fascinating, I almost use that word, fascinating matchup this Saturday in Kinnick. And I do feel pretty good about Iowa's chances, but we'll talk about it in just a moment. But first, I want to thank Iowa Floor Covering down in Bondurant. If you've got a renovation or a DIY project on your hands and you're looking at some flooring options, or perhaps you've got a new bathroom in the works, they can help you with the tile shower as well. Give them a call, 515-379-7000. Even if you're not from the area, if you're not from Central Iowa, definitely call them and let them know that we sent you here from the Hawkeye of the Storm, and they can point you in the right direction, give you some helpful tips. You can also visit their website. It's iowafloorcovering.com. Again, that's www.iowafloorcovering.com. So the Hawkeyes and the Cyclones this Saturday. How about the first CBS game from Kinnick Stadium since 1985? It should be great. Got Brad Nessler, Gary Danielson on the call, a 2:30 p.m. Central Time kick between the Hawkeyes and the Cyclones. Both teams beating very similar opponents last week. North Dakota fell to the Cyclones, and North Dakota picked very closely to where Illinois State was picked preseason in the Missouri Valley Conference, a very good FCS conference, best conference in the country at that level. Pretty much controlled the game, 21-3. You may look at that number 21 and think, well, why didn't they score more with the vaunted wide receiving core that they have at their disposal? Well, the answer is North Dakota State's offense just stayed on the field much more than people would have anticipated. I know the time of possession stat is downplayed by some, but how about this number? 38 minutes of time of possession for the Fighting Hawks versus just 22 for the Cyclones. North Dakota actually outgained Iowa State as it relates to first downs, and it was very close in total yardage. 353 for Iowa State, 295 for North Dakota. The Fighting Hawks did outgain Iowa State on the ground, 174-86. Now, context is important here. Rushing attempts, 42 for North Dakota, just 22 for Iowa State. And kind of an example of that was the first possession of the game. Iowa State went down the field 2 plays in 38 seconds for a touchdown, 2 pass plays down the field. And Iowa State's receiving core looked really good. And I think they're going to be really good all year, led by none other than veteran Jalen Knoll, Jaden Higgins, the former transfer, and Eli Green, who's a transfer from North Dakota State. It's a guy Iowa actually was interested in during the offseason. Those guys combined for well over 200 yards, actually combined for about 250 yards through the air and a couple of touchdowns. Of course, Iowa's receiving core looked pretty good on Saturday as well, but that is relative to what we've seen out of a group that has struggled with drops, struggled to get to the end zone. Iowa actually equaled the number of touchdowns for that wide receiver group last week with 3. Last year just had 3 for the season for that group, and then in 2022, just 2 touchdown catches for the wide receiver room all season. And led by Reese Vanderzee and Jacob Gill, that group looked good Saturday, even without the help of Seth Anderson and Caleb Brown, who at times last year were wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. So that is positive news. Cade McNamara looked mobile, looked ready. I mean, he made a couple of throws off his back foot that will need to be cleaned up. But when you have a receiver like Reese Vanderzee, you can go up and get one. That is good news. I think my major takeaways from going back and watching the Iowa State game, talent galore at wide receiver. I do like Rocco Becht. It seems like he's really grown up since when Iowa played them a year ago, but opponent should be taken into account. That's not a great front 7 for North Dakota. That's why I was almost surprised that Iowa State struggled as much as they did to run the ball. Now, they didn't run a ton, as I mentioned, just over 20 rushes for the game. They aired it out really well. Rocco Becht looked sharp. North Dakota is also not real veteran up front on offense. Caleb Bacon, linebacker for Iowa State, went down with an injury. He is out for this game, could return later in the season, but he's out for the Cyhawk game. They are starting a green group of linebackers. Now they play that extra, I think they call it a star safety in that John Haycock defense. They've got a lot of experience back there. I've been talking about the Iowa State safeties for some months now. Malik Verdon, Jeremiah Cooper, Bo Freeler, all really good safeties. I do think you're going to see maybe an opportunity for Iowa to attack at least one of those two cornerbacks. And the Iowa State DB, the cornerback that I thought struggled at certain times in the game, was Jontez Williams. He finished with 11 total tackles. Typically, you don't want your corners to be racking up the tackles. But again, I think that's an opportunity where if you're Iowa and you attack that linebacker position, a bunch of young green guys, and can get that run game going early, perhaps you make some of those safeties have to cheat down, and then you can take advantage and perhaps get a guy like Caleb Brown who's coming back off of a suspension. Maybe it's a Jacob Gill or a Reese Vanderzee free. I think that's going to be my key matchup number one. It's going to be Iowa State's front seven on D versus Iowa's run game. Iowa should be able to run the ball in this game. They should. I mean, it's going to force Iowa State to have to load the box. We didn't see as much of a loaded box last week as some people expected. If you go back and watch the tape, Don Patterson has been very passionate to correct people on this because everybody loves to talk about how Iowa's running up against a loaded box. That's not as much the case as people think, but Iowa State may be forced to bring safeties down more than they typically would and make Iowa beat them over the top. But if they can get the run game going, that's Iowa. If they can get that rushing attack going early, maybe ride some momentum from Caleb Johnson's big second half against Illinois State, and then that opens up play action perhaps as the game goes forward. Iowa State's solid at running back. Carson Hansen got a lot of carries last week. Abu Sama is the workhorse, and for people that don't know anything about Abu Sama, he was former teammates with Xavier Wampa. He is a really good football player. Go back and watch Iowa State versus Kansas State in the snow last year. Abu Sama's got an opportunity to be the next NFL back in that Iowa State offense, but he did not get it going. Did come up injured at one point during the game. It sounds like he's going to be good to go, but that is a storyline as well. Can Iowa stifle him with a couple of interior guys in Aaron Graves and Y.A. Black, who played really well last week, and a loaded linebacker group? I know Iowa State fans would have you believe that the biggest gap position to position in this game is Iowa State's receivers versus Iowa's receivers. There's a bigger gap between Iowa's All-American linebacker room and Iowa State's very green linebacker room. Does Abu Sama get any ground on Saturday? If he does, it's going to make the assignment more difficult to cover those receivers. But expect the other key matchup to be this, folks. Can Iowa State attack the opposite side of the field to Jamari Harris? Now, they're going to attack Harris because they like both of these receivers, and they also like Green out of North Dakota State. So they're going to probably attack a variety of places, but there are still some question marks surrounding that other cornerback spot. TJ Hall looked good during his time on Saturday, but this is a much better quarterback they're facing, a much better offense, and a much better receiver, whether it's Higgins, whether it is Knoll, whoever matches up on that side of the field is going to test TJ Hall, or if it's John Nestor or Deshaun Lee, vertically. And to me, that's the big thing. I know people keep talking about spreading them out. Iowa State's got to spread out Iowa like Purdue did for years with Jeff Brom. Jeff Brom was a one-of-a-kind offensive mind. I don't think Iowa State has the staff to quite execute to the level of what Purdue was able to do. But I do buy into the fact that they're going to have to win this game through the air, because I just have a hard time seeing Iowa State dominating on the ground early. Maybe if they can get it going and force Iowa to kind of play left-handed, maybe that run game can get going late. That's probably going to be the key to success. I will give you my score prediction here tomorrow. Stay tuned for a YouTube short, and we'll post it on all the social media platforms if you're not following: Facebook, Instagram, etc. I'm Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Tune in live for Iowa postgame with Coach Don Patterson after the Cyhawk game Saturday. It will kick at 2:30 p.m. Central Time, and it will air on CBS. We'll talk to you Saturday.